Good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you're listening from. As I always say, welcome to Canyouth Exploration, your topic in the podcast. I am Dr. Canyouth White. I'll be talking to Steve Wilson in this episode. And Steve has a lot to say, a lot to tell you so that you'll understand bipolar disorder and trauma. And those of you who know me and listen to my podcast know that I'm in psychology. It's nice to have you listening. Those who are on Apple Podcasts and the other podcast platform, it's nice to have you. Welcome to Canyouth Exploration. I'm going to let Steve in and we'll have a chat about trauma, bipolar, many other things that you will appreciate. Those of you who are living with the disorder will appreciate it. And those of you who are students of psychology will also appreciate it. Those who are caring for persons who are living with psychological disorder will also appreciate this episode. Um, Steve, how are you doing?
How are you?
I'm good. It's nice to have you on Canyouth Exploration, your topic in the
Here.
podcast, right? And we'll be talking a lot about a number of things. But before that, let's tell us about your who you are personally and professionally.
All right. My name is Steve Wilson. I'm 74 years old. I've been married for 50 years.
Hmm.
I have three daughters, two granddaughters. I retired in 2019 from the custom clothing business.
Hmm.
I was born and raised in Delaware, Ohio, and now I live in Scottsdale, Arizona, and it's only 105 today.
Oh, 105.
Yes.
That's not nice to live in.
Pardon me?
That's not nice to live in. 105.
It really isn't bad
Hmm.
for me
Okay.
until it hits about 110, and then it's a cooker.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I'm in the Bronx, New York. Usually reach out to you guys from Florida, from Miramar, but somehow I'm in the Bronx. Well, you know it can get in the Bronx, right? In comparison to Florida, right? Hey, let me ask you though, your childhood. Tell us about your childhood. Your age. I'm impressed with your age, and I'm impressed with the number of years that you are married. 50 years.
Yes,
What do
to
you
the
call
same
that?
person, by the way,
Golden? Huh?
to the same person.
To the same person. That's great. You call that what? Golden? Or is it golden? That's
Golden,
what,
yes.
okay. Fine. Oh, so you start getting medals, right?
Yeah.
All right. Tell us about your childhood, though.
Well, I was just like any normal kid,
Hmm.
feeling good, playing with a lot of friends, doing
Hmm.
well in school, and everything was fine. Um, I had, as I said, a lot of friends and no problems
Hmm.
until I hit age 9.
Hmm.
We used to go to the theater in my hometown every Saturday, and we would watch westerns. And at that time, they had double features. So the way it worked was at the end of one feature, the curtain would come down
Okay.
and everybody would hustle up to the concession stand.
Hmm.
And I always brought 25 cents with me so I could get a
Okay.
Coke and some popcorn.
Hmm.
This one day, I'm got my popcorn. I went over to the Coke machine because it was a stand-free Coke machine, and it was just old age.
Right.
So as I got up to my turn to get a Coke, some man put a dime in the machine and paid for my Coke.
Okay.
Well, I didn't know who it was. Didn't mean anything to me. And the Coke came out. I started to walk away, and he says, "Would you help me a minute? I need some help here in the theater."
Hmm.
Now, back then, there was no stranger danger.
Okay.
We were never warned about someone lurking in the shadows. So I said, "Sure, what do you want me to do?" He
Mhm.
said, "Come on in here in the restroom. I got something to fix."
Yeah.
Well, the fix was me,
Oh.
and went into the restroom
Mhm.
with no knowledge of what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And I turned around
Mhm.
and he said, "Take down your pants."
Mhm.
And I was scared to death, didn't know what was
Yeah.
happening, didn't know this could happen.
Mhm.
And he proceeded to sexually assault me.
Yeah.
When I resisted, he actually threw me up against the wall and started choking me.
Yeah.
And basically, that's about all I remember.
What
Uh,
age was that?
pardon me?
What age? What age?
9,
9. Mm.
yes.
Yeah.
Um, you really gotta realize that back then,
Mhm. Mhm.
nobody talked about it.
Yeah. It was
Nobody
an
talked
elephant
about
in the
man
room.
on man or man on woman rape or anything else. It
Mhm.
was taboo.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when we got done,
Mhm.
I my mind says, "What did I do to
Mhm.
cause this? It's
Yeah.
my fault."
Mhm.
So I said to myself, "I'm not telling anybody."
Yeah.
And so I locked it away for 30 years
Oh.
and didn't tell a soul.
Mhm.
And the next thing I knew, I came home about a month later, 2 months later, from
Yeah.
a trip to Florida for a vacation.
Mhm.
And when I got back, the terrible depression started setting in.
Oh.
And all of a sudden, I couldn't study. I didn't want to play with my friends. I thought nobody loved me. I thought I was
Mhm.
a piece of garbage. I was screwed. I couldn't sleep,
Yeah.
which was one of the really worst things.
Yeah.
And this lasted a couple of months,
Mhm.
and I just barely got through whatever grade that was, 4th grade or 5th grade,
Yeah.
but I did.
Yeah.
And the depression lifted after 2 or 3 months.
Okay.
It didn't come back for a long
Yeah.
time.
Mhm.
I had no idea what it was. I
Mhm.
didn't know. My parents didn't know what I was going through. My
Mhm.
sister and brother didn't know because I kept it all to myself.
Yeah.
And I'd never heard of a psychologist or psychiatrist. I didn't
Right.
know anything. So
Mhm.
I locked it up. And every once in a while, the depression would come back. And I just dealt with it the best I could.
What year was that?
That
What?
year
What?
was 1958.
Oh.
So
Mm.
what you can see is what people think of psychology and psychiatrists today
Yeah.
isn't the same as what it was back then.
Right. Yeah.
But I will say that there's still just as many rapes,
Yeah.
sexual assaults, and all that. That
Yeah.
has not changed,
Yeah.
in
It,
my
it,
opinion.
I doubt it has changed. And interestingly, you talked about 1958, 1958. And
Mhm.
I am a professor of psychology, and I'm doing a course at a university we call mental health therapy, right?
Yes.
Evidence-based mental health therapy. And one of the research that my group has been doing is to compare the psychology way back then from 1950 to the contemporary time.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
they found that the stigma wasn't as much then, and psychology was different in terms of the treatment. And you will note, Steve, that psychologists long ago would approach mental disorder differently, trauma differently. They would beat individuals with mental challenges, figure that it was a demonic thing. So yes, it has changed a lot. I'm happy to hear you talking about the 50s as it relates to a disorder that you is still having, right? The onset
Yes,
early.
I have it under control thanks to psychiatrists
Yeah,
I started with, and medication, and a lot of therapy.
yeah, yeah. Interestingly. But the next question I'd like to ask you though, the trauma that you had gone through, the depression, bipolar in effect, what's the worst experience that you have had as it relates to depression and the bipolar?
Well, I want to make something clear
Mm-hmm,
from the start.
mm-hmm.
In 1970 is when I went to my first psychiatrist. So
Right.
that's 12 years after the incident.
Yeah.
At that time, he diagnosed me with clinical depression
Okay.
and started me on a regimen of whatever medication they had back then.
Yeah.
And it wasn't much.
Mm-hmm.
And none of the medications worked. They all made me sick.
Okay.
So I struggled with that for 6 years, being mostly terribly down.
Mm-hmm.
Got in a really bad fight with my father, and to tell you the truth, I wanted to stab him and almost did.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And then I went into the hospital,
Yeah.
and that was 1970. Um, but in 72, they diagnosed me with clinical depression, and nothing worked. And then in 1978, this same psychiatrist came in and said, "You know, Steve,
Yeah.
I misdiagnosed you."
Wow.
Oh, by the way, that happens a lot.
Yeah, I know that.
So anyway, he says, "I think you're bipolar." Didn't mean anything to me. What the hell's bipolar? Never heard of it. And he said, "We're going to start you on this drug that has a lot of good results," and that was lithium.
Yeah.
And wouldn't you know it, in about 2 days, I started feeling better. And the lithium got me back maybe 50% of the way, but I was able to function.
Yeah.
And I went through a horrible, the thing that lithium didn't get rid of was a terrible congestion in my mind.
Yeah.
Ruminations just driving me crazy. All I could think about was anything and everything, and I couldn't shut off my mind.
Yeah.
And that became the worst. I still couldn't sleep, but I felt better. So it was
Okay.
the beginning of my
Mhm.
recovery.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, but the signs and symptoms that you have experienced, uh, well, not necessarily as it relates to trauma, but the bipolar situation. What were those signs and symptoms that you have experienced?
Uh, it's People don't realize that bipolar and depression don't just affect your mental side; it affects your body and causes aches and pains. And for me, it caused a big knot in my stomach,
Yeah.
and I would get fevers, but no one could tell that they were fevers because
Yeah.
it really wasn't there. It was just my body out of control. Um, I remember one day I was swimming. I'm a big fan of swimming,
Yeah.
and I swam laps every day. And I went to the local pool to swim laps,
Hmm.
and I started swimming. And every stroke,
Yeah.
something came up in my mind and said, "Kill yourself."
Yeah.
So for every stroke, I got out of the pool quickly. I went over, cross and back,
Yeah.
and it was just horrible to think that my mind not only controlled my body, but the bipolar not only controlled my body, but it controlled
Mhm.
my mind too. I couldn't shut it off.
Yeah.
And this is even with the lithium.
Okay. Mhm.
Um,
So there was a sort of psychosomatic,
Pardon me?
psychosomatic. mind and body
Yes, yes.
challenge. Okay.
Um, the funny thing is, I would get sick all the time,
Mhm.
have to take time off from work, but I wasn't really sick.
Okay. Mhm.
I mean, I felt horrible. I thought I had a fever. I had
Mhm.
aches and pains. If I go to the doctor, they'd go, hmm, maybe
Yeah.
you ought to just rest. They had no idea, and I had no idea at the time.
Yeah.
It was all related to the depression and the bipolar.
Mhm. Look, we talk about psychosomatic, but there's also a thing called hypochondriosis, right? I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term.
Hmm.
Okay, fine. So, would you say that you were affected by that at that time? You weren't really sick, but your mind just tell you that, hey, I'm having this sickness.
I don't know, to tell you the truth. I've been that way ever since
Mhm.
the uh, rape when I was 9 years old.
Right.
I've always been not sick, but feeling like I was.
Yeah.
And even today, if I get a little ache and pain, I go, "Oh my God,
Yeah.
I got cancer."
Mhm. Mhm.
So yes, that can affect anybody, and it drives me out of my mind.
Yeah.
And people I've been friends with for years think I'm a hypochondriac because
Yeah.
of all the things I've gone through. So maybe I am.
Yeah, yeah, and that's okay. That's okay, Steve. But you know, and those of you who are listening, this is Canyouth Exploration, your topic in the podcast. I'm Dr. Canyouth White. Those of you who are listening, usually doctors will give what we call a placebo. Some people say placebo,
Mhm.
right? And the mind of the person getting it would think that okay, it's something that helped me because doctors realize, hey, this is hypochondrosis, and they're not really sick, so just give them something and the mind saying that, okay, I get something, so I'm well. Just for those persons who, Steve, who might be wondering what we're talking about. But Steve, suicidal ideation. You, I heard somewhere, I read somewhere that you might have dealt with that. Tell us about what it's like having this sort of ideation. What's going on there?
Well, let me tell you this way.
Yeah.
A friend of mine, about 4 years ago, he was a very prominent citizen in Delaware, Ohio,
Hmm.
very big churchgoer, gave out a lot of money. Everybody loved him.
Okay.
One day, his wife came home and he was hanging from the rafters in the basement. He had
Yeah.
killed himself.
Okay.
Um, I knew, unlike anybody else, what he had gone through,
Yeah.
and it is horrible.
Hmm.
You think in your own mind that the only thing that's left for you to do to help everybody else
Yeah.
so they can quit worrying about you if they knew
Hmm.
is to kill yourself.
Hmm.
Um, it is not because they want to harm somebody or get back at them.
Yeah.
Your mind is completely controlled by these thoughts.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people can fight them off. I was able to.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about percentages of people who go through suicidal ideations and go on to kill themselves,
Hmm.
but it is definitely out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, it's something that many persons, even wealthy people, are challenged with, you know, wanting to kill themselves. Back in Jamaica, there are many wealthy persons. I remember, I can recall a governor of the Bank of Jamaica who was, they're well paid, and he actually killed himself. And, you know, here in Manhattan, in the New York, there is this Miss, it was on in the news, Miss United States of America. She was a lawyer, very young girl, doing well, but she killed herself because, you know, I read, it was reported that basically she believed that she was not loved enough and being challenged. So there are many things, that would make people want to kill themselves. The rich, the poor, it doesn't matter
Does not matter.
what race, what social class you're in. There are persons with even persons in the church,
Right.
Steve, who perhaps want to commit suicide. But it's interesting that you have gone through this, and you came through it, and I must applaud you for it as well. But Steve, how did bipolar affect your family life? I know that you're a senior, and with 50 years of marriage, I can't I can't over repeat that, right? But how did it affect your family life?
Well, to tell you the truth, I was one of the ones, and there are many of us who learned to fake it.
Okay.
In other words, my family had no clue what I was going through.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I relied an awful lot in my life on humor.
Okay.
I was known as one of the class clowns,
All right.
and nobody knew how badly I was suffering. And
Yeah.
I mean nobody,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because I faked it so well,
Mhm.
and I would laugh. A great way to get through.
Yeah.
I did sports. Uh, I just did anything to not let anybody know what I was going through.
Yeah.
In other words, I had no support system,
Okay.
which is very bad
Hmm. Hmm.
because you need that support system.
But before you continue, I'd like to rephrase that. I didn't want any support system because I correct me if I'm wrong, because based on what I'm getting from you, you hide it. It was hidden, and if you didn't hide it, then you'd have gotten the support system. So in effect, you had the support system, but you didn't want the support system. You didn't trigger the support system. Am I right?
That is correct. And the actual, if I really think about it, the
Mhm.
reason was of the stigmas
Right. Yeah.
that, back then, and even more so than today, I think,
Yeah.
uh, anyone who was considered mentally ill might end up locked up. And
Yeah.
that's the way I saw it. I've got to keep this thing quiet. I don't want anybody to know.
Yeah.
Um, now, I am not a professional in
Yeah.
mental illness,
Yeah.
but I do have two groups that I facilitate out here in Phoenix.
Okay.
And I have learned a lot about the mental health system.
Oh
I've been
yeah.
doing this for 8 years. I've seen over 1,000 people.
Yeah. That's cool.
Say,
And what I want you to do, Steve, since you're on this forum, and we have gotten listenership from all over a number of places, including Russia, Ukraine, Spain, Caribbean region. I have realized through data. Those groups that you have, are there groups that persons from outside of your region can be a part of? Is it
yes,
Facebook group?
yes.
Can
Um,
you can you tell us a little about that group, briefly? Those groups.
yeah, we're a company. I don't get paid. This is all
Okay.
freebie.
Right.
Um, we have about 5 or 6 mental health support groups a week. I do 2 of them.
Hmm.
No charge. Anybody can join,
Hmm.
but you have to join by contacting me.
Hmm.
Um, we have a guy from Rhode Island, a couple people from Tucson, and we're in Phoenix. That's 2 hours away.
Hmm.
And we do all this in a video format, just like this.
Okay.
One of the problems is how many people I can talk to in a 2 hour time period.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's about 12 to 15.
Mm. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
requests are overwhelming
Oh yeah.
into the groups.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I accept everybody. who wants to come. But if I get over, I had 17 last night.
Oh,
It
oh,
went right up to the 2 hour limit. If I
nice.
had more than that, nobody gets the
Yeah.
full help they should
Mm,
get.
yeah.
Um, but if you'd like, I can give you my email and people can contact me if they want to come.
Yeah, you can read your email out, and I will put it in the description as well. But you can say your email.
Okay. S as in Steve, WWILSON.Wilson@gmail.com.
Right. And I listeners, I suggest that only if you need help, only if Steve group can help you. So don't get involved if it's not related to what Steve is doing. Right. I'm just
Must
saying that.
must say
Yeah.
that every state I know of has these groups available.
Right. Okay.
And there are associations that you can go to find one in your area.
Okay.
The one that comes into my mind um, is NAMI,
Okay.
NAMI. You can find it on the internet and you plug in uh, where support groups are for mental health
Great.
and tell them what state you're in, what city.
Okay.
And if you don't want to get on mine because you think it's too far away. And
Right.
also, one of the things is remember this,
Yeah.
the guy from New Hampshire has to come on at 10 o'clock at night because I'm on at 7 in Phoenix.
Hmm.
So you've got to take that into consideration because you'll be staying up to midnight.
Okay. All right. I hope my listeners and viewers hear that. But tell me, let me say this before. You talked about stigma, and stigma is a very, very important aspect of this mental health saga. Because if you have familial stigma, a lot of time persons, take for instance, one member of the family is living with mental challenges. Then you find that the entire family is being stigmatized because that one member is living with, say, schizophrenia or something.
Yeah,
They call that a mad family. So family is all family in general. Is also affected by just one member being
correct.
stigmatized, and naturally the individual member being stigmatized out there in the school and so on,
I'll
workplace.
tell you, when I went into the hospital in 1971,
Yeah.
that's the first time my parents really knew I was in trouble.
Okay.
They made up a story that I was someplace else
Yeah.
and wouldn't tell anybody what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
My parents were very prominent in our little town,
Okay.
and they didn't want to realize that they had a screwed up son.
Yeah. Yeah. Steve, I'm happy you said that because it means then that the help that you would have gotten, perhaps, yeah, you have gotten help, but more help. It was affected by this, wanting to hush to avoid stigma, right?
Right.
And therefore, even now, in contemporary mental health situations, there are family members who are saying, "Hey, I don't want anybody to know that my son, my daughter, my cousin, my niece is living with a mental challenge. So I'm
Right.
going to hush hush." It robbed that niece, that cousin, that child from treatment, from support outside of the family.
Correct. And I was really trying to keep my
Yeah,
family and friends from letting that word out
yeah,
because I was afraid that one,
yeah,
friends of mine would not understand and they'd suddenly disappear.
yeah,
And I was also afraid of the fact that when I was at my worst, after during the hospital stay and a little bit before,
yeah,
my parents said things like, "You've got everything to live for. Why
yeah,
don't you realize that and get out of this?"
Mm-hmm.
That was so harmful to me.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, it was terrible. And people would say, well, just go take a walk
yeah,
or go to the movies.
yeah.
And I hate to break the news to you people, that doesn't help.
Yeah, I know, right? I'm in psychology and I can tell you it's a different thing. Persons who do not understand the suicide ideation and persons like me in psychology and so on, we had studied these things because we study people and study disorders. And we understand the challenges that people go through when they're living with suicidal ideology. It's not like you can just do like this and it goes,
Right.
right? It's a challenge, it's a real challenge. And people need to understand and I am sure that more and more people are understanding because of medium like this podcast. People
Yes.
like you who are talking or spreading the message of, hey, this is a challenge for people. Don't think that they put it on themselves, and we have to understand it.
Well, one of the best things people can do
Yeah,
to realize that there are millions of people who suffer from mental illness.
yeah,
I think the worldwide average is 20%.
yeah.
Uh, is to go to groups because, and I'm not a professional, but I
Right,
have
right.
learned so much about how inadequate the systems are,
Hmm, hmm.
how the struggles that people in my groups have to get mental attention,
Yeah.
how really, if they get the mental attention and they're really hurting and they go in and see a professional and they're in distress,
Hmm, hmm.
and if they're in a clinic, sometimes they go, well, your next appointment is a month from now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And what the hell good is that going to do if you're in distress?
yeah. Definitely.
So there's a lot
Mhm.
of inadequacies in the professional ranks.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
as far as we've talked about
Hmm.
in our groups, is a dwindling availability of psychiatrists and
Oh
psychologists
yeah.
and
Oh
being
yeah.
able to get into somebody.
Yeah. I
And
think the system made it, harder because people like me who's in psychology and so on, right? You find that many of us, especially in the United States, are not, there's maybe some difficulty in getting placed based on the state, right? And the board and all of that, and the challenges that you have to go through to be able to practice in a particular state or region and those are some challenges and many men in psychology are getting out of the
yes,
profession because of things like that. So yeah, there's a real challenge.
and there's a real problem with insurance from what people
Oh yeah.
my groups say. They say, well, they go to the doctor and they say, well, do you have my insurance? I don't take insurance because they take so much of my money I can't exist.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's a
yeah,
problem.
yeah. There's a challenge, but I wanted to throw this at you, Steve. It was said even from some of my students, and I acknowledge that apart from the familial stigma and individual stigma, patient stigma, there's also this racial stigma and gender stigma as it relates to mental illnesses. Because I can tell you from where I am from in Jamaica, um, you all find women with schizophrenia. In most of schizophrenia, you see people walking on the street,
Mhm.
right? You hardly find women with schizophrenia walking on the street. They will be referred to as mad people, right? But you find a lot of men because women will protect women in terms of that nudity on the street and pull them off because I think women are more protective of women who are suffering from mental illness than men are protective of men that are suffering from mental illness. And we will see a lot of persons and my class acknowledge that a lot of persons who are African American, let's say that, who might be on the street than persons who are of other race, especially Chinese and so on, because the stigma is being protected by the race, saying, "Hey, we don't want to see our people on the street, so let's protect them." What are you seeing there? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, all of my information, of course, comes from my past experiences, plus a big portion comes from my groups.
Right.
I will tell you that I've been doing this for 8 years. I've seen over 1,000 people, as I've said. I have seen in those years maybe 5 or 10 African Americans.
Mhm.
But I have seen about an equal uh, distribution of men and women.
Okay.
I have had people saying, I won't go to a male
Okay.
therapist. I won't go to a woman therapist.
Yeah.
Now, I always thought that that would be because a woman wants to talk to a woman and a man wants to talk to a man.
Okay. Hmm.
I am finding from listening to these people
Yeah.
that women therapists are more hands on from what they tell me.
Mm.
That they sometimes think that men are aloof
Yeah.
or they're. I just went to a doctor recently
Yeah.
and I'd never met him before. And he didn't even look at me. He was just typing on his
Yeah.
computer. So maybe it's true.
Yeah.
Women are better. When I was really going through the bad times,
Yeah.
I don't remember running into a female therapist
Mhm.
ever. So maybe that's all changing now
Right.
because,
It is. Mhm.
but the
Yeah.
real problem is not whether they want to go to a man or a woman. The real
Mhm.
problem is finding somebody.
Oh yeah.
That's the problem.
Oh yeah.
And
A
many,
lot of us. A lot of us are now teaching. For me, I'm teaching a lot now than in practice. I'm doing research and teaching a lot.
Mhm,
Um, so you really find that back in Florida, I note that there was a shortage of male psychologists, male slash therapists, right? More females you're seeing, and they wanted to get more males into the system. But actually, they are qualified males, but they don't much in the system. So that's a challenge now. But tell me, Steve, medication. I think you have alluded to it earlier. But
yes.
right, but these psych medications, right? I want you to talk some more about it. You have not said much, I figure. But what were your real experience with these psych medications? Some people would say that when they take these medication, they become like a zombie and so on. And
Mhm.
I tell you this, being in psychology and was in the field, that there are many mothers who were saying that, hey, I don't want my child who is suffering from ADHD or conduct disorder, any other disorder for children. I don't want my child to take medication because it will affect my child. So they
Yes.
rather not to have medication. What's going on there?
Well, let me just give you a response to that by what happened to me.
Yeah.
I was put on my regimen, and it's a cocktail,
Okay.
not just one pill, in my experience, is going to fix you
Right.
totally.
Right.
So I take 4 medications every day.
Okay.
One, let's see, this is in 1989. I'd had this psychiatrist for about 18 or 20 years.
Mhm.
He dies. I'd been pretty good, but not perfect, as I said before.
All right. Yeah.
So I found another psychiatrist, didn't know him. He was a partner with a psychologist in my town.
Mhm.
And he said, this guy's good. So I went to him. And the first thing he said was, throw away all the medication you're on.
Mm.
There's a brand new drug that is the godsend drug, um, Deseril. You ever hear of
Okay.
it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. He says it's going to take about a month, but you will be cured.
Mhm.
Well, 5 months later, I'm in terrible shape, was almost in terrible shape
Okay.
from about 2 weeks out.
Mhm.
And I got up the courage to fire this guy. And
Yeah.
go back to the psychiatrist's partner, and he got me back on the schedule.
Yeah.
What I have found is that no 1, 2, or 3 medications work for everybody.
Okay. You're right.
You are a single entity, and what works for you is not the same as what can work for the next guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
A psychiatrist I went to about 8 or 9 years ago told me that only 50% of mental patients respond to medication.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, that's problematic,
It is. It is.
needless to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
So I was one of the lucky ones that it worked for. Now, you mentioned
Mm.
side effects.
Yeah.
In my groups, I probably had several, I don't know how many people,
Mhm.
say the worst thing that happened to them was that they gained weight.
Yeah.
And it wasn't 10 or 20 pounds, it was 40, 50, 60, 70 pounds.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
And
right.
because of that, they were so ashamed with their body size that they quit the medication.
Yeah.
They would rather look good, or at least like they
Yeah.
did look,
Yeah.
than be mentally better.
Right. Yeah.
My side effect that I had was that I had 2 terrible side effects
Okay.
from 2 different medications.
Yeah.
Lithium.
Mhm.
I was told from the beginning that it could cause kidney problems.
Yeah.
I took it for 22 years. It did cause kidney problems.
Oh.
Just a year and a half ago, I had to have a kidney transplant.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah.
That's okay. I survived.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah.
Now, I would never tell anybody to go off the lithium just because that's a possibility.
Yeah.
Just got to keep watching it
Yeah.
because there are other drugs. The second drug that screwed up my life um,
Mhm.
caused tardive dyskinesia because it was an antipsychotic
Okay.
in my eyelids. It was horrible.
Yeah.
The problem with that drug is, like the lithium, is you can't get rid of it.
Oh.
So I had to start getting Botox shots around my eyes every 3 months.
Yeah.
But in my estimation, going through the shots every 3 months was better than not being mentally well.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
kind of a
Yeah.
trade-off deal.
Yeah. So it all depends on the individual, because there are some persons who said, "Hey, I rather this than to go through that." But one of the things you did not mention, and we in psychology we know that some of these drugs will cause sexual challenges.
Yes. Now, they do, not for everybody,
Right, not for everybody.
never did for me,
Mhm.
but I
Yeah,
have a lot of my people complain about it.
yeah,
And that is a big deal.
yeah. Of
That's a
course it is.
huge deal with people.
Yeah,
And they'll quit taking the drugs right now.
yeah, definitely. But and it speaks to with the sexual challenges that some of these drugs will cause, and the weight gain is like, for the weight gain, it will then cause another depressive episode, right? Because people think that, oh, I'm getting too big, and
Yeah,
that's not me. And for the sexual deficiency, again, another depressive episode, because they're not able
definitely.
to satisfy their partner sexually. So it's a balance. It depends on who you are and what is more important to you as an individual.
If I could try to leave a message, and this is in my new book
Yeah,
called
we should
Teen
talk
Brain
about too. Yeah.
Psycho. After going through all of the things that happened to me,
Mm.
I try to tell people, one, it's a long journey.
Mhm.
There is no cure for bipolar.
Right, right.
That's my understanding.
Yeah, yeah.
And there are a lot of different things you can do. There's medication, there's therapy,
Mhm.
there's Well, I can't think of them now.
Yeah,
So
there are a lot of things you can do. The talk support and all of that, and even the whole support system can help you to
yeah.
maneuver the thing, right?
The
Um,
big thing I try to tell them is you're in this for the long haul.
yeah,
Don't stop doing what your doctor or therapist tell
yeah,
you to do unless you feel that it's harming you more than the good it's doing.
yeah,
Too many people go, well, I took the drug for 2 weeks. It didn't do me any good, so I threw it
yeah,
away last night.
yeah. It's a challenge. Yeah,
So my my book is about what can happen to you when
yeah,
you're going through bipolar or depression. But the better message is, like me, you
yeah,
can beat it and have a damn good life.
yeah. So therapy. We talk about therapy before I go on to your book, which we'll talk about before we end. Um,
Okay.
the benefits of psychotherapy, and again, you have alluded to some of these benefits, but let's be specific. If you have not gone to psychotherapy, through psychotherapy, what would have happened? Do you think would have happened to you? And in other words, what are the benefits of going to psychotherapy?
If I had not gone through psychotherapy with a very understanding psychiatrist and a man who became my mentor and the guy who basically saved my life, I never would have made it.
Okay, okay,
It is very important if you don't have somebody in your own family or support group to really talk about what's going on. And that takes maybe months before you'll be able to take this guy into your confidence or this woman. But without psychotherapy, I wouldn't have made it. That's my belief.
yeah, yeah, that's interesting. Let's go to your book now. I think you have an interesting book there. I just want to go through that a little, right? Talk to us about your book.
Well, uh, we've already talked about my rape at 9 years old.
Right.
That's almost where it starts. I talk a little bit about being a normal kid until
Mm.
that. And then it goes through all the things I experienced that even when I got the lithium and the got better, there were still things I had to overcome.
Right.
It took 30 years to get the final ingredient of my cocktail that made me much better. And that was a drug. I'll tell you the drug, but it doesn't mean it's going to work for anybody else. Was Paxil. And
Mm.
what it did was get rid of my ruminations about 90% so I could control my own mind.
Right. Right.
I
Mhm.
also spend a lot of time discussing what I think is one of the most important things in the book is the groups I'm involved in.
Okay.
And because as I said, I'm not an experienced therapist,
Right.
but I feel that you can get the real story from people who are going through it.
Definitely.
And
Yeah.
so we talk every week. I give everybody as much time as they want to discuss what they're going through. And these people are, a lot of them, able to break down and say, yes, they too were molested or
Oh yeah.
beaten or whatever it is. And so we spend a lot of time on that, and that's in the book too.
Mm. Mm.
I spent a chapter on teenage depression,
Yeah.
and I talk about the same thing of not having a support group. But I'll tell you one thing that happened in my life was I had a clothing store that had been in business for about 80 years.
Yeah.
And every every Christmas season we would hire a couple high school girls and sometimes boys, but mostly the girls were more efficient because they were wrapping packages
Yeah.
and running errands.
Mhm.
there was this nice little girl, energetic, outspoken, wonderful little girl. And she was probably my favorite of all the ones we ever had.
Mhm.
I was in the store one Saturday morning early, and her best friend comes in and tells me that this little girl had gone to bed the night before and shot herself in the head.
Mhm. Yeah.
Teenagers are suffering so much
Yeah.
that I don't think anybody realizes how bad it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
One girl told me that she was a top student,
Mhm.
straight A's, getting the best grades on the tests to go to college. And she came to me and said, I am so down because everybody expects me to excel at everything.
Yeah.
I just can't handle the pressure.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was sad. And another girl came to me and said, I have no friends. My parents don't like me. I want to die.
Yeah.
So, teenagers, college students are really suffering, just like I did. It's never changed,
Yeah.
and it's horrible. And then the last thing I tell them is just like I said before, you can make it through if you're diligent enough to give it everything you got to get to a good life.
Yeah. 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 Steve, it has become perhaps a taboo in terms of talking about um, teenage depression, childhood depression. And, I can recall while studying, I went to a seminar that uh, deals with childhood depression and explained to us, and we have seen it, where the 5-year old, the 3-year old can be depressed,
Mhm.
right? More so teenagers, because of that change in their whole life cycle, life thing, and what they have to go through at school, and the whole misunderstanding of parents as well, their own parents, and the challenges with peer pressure. So yes, but it has been, in my mind, a sort of an elephant in the room as it relates to adolescent depression. And we talk about all other type of depression, even depression of persons who are retired and so on, not being at work. So many things can create the depressive mood.
Well, I want to say one thing
Yeah,
that I went through that horrible situation when I was 9.
yeah,
Again, going back to my groups, a high percentage, and most of these people are between 21 and 80. So
yeah,
there's not, just a spattering of people at different ages. What they've all told me is they've either been sexually assaulted at a young age, or
right,
been beaten, or they've been mentally screwed up because their parents are telling them they're worthless.
yeah,
It is an epidemic out there of what people do to their own kids. And I
yeah,
have an example for you that is the worst one I ever heard.
yeah,
And it came directly from a friend of mine who worked for me. And she
right.
spilled her guts one night and told me what she was going through.
Mhm, mhm.
Her husband, if their son did anything wrong, he would take him to the basement, tie him to a post, and burn him with cigarettes.
Oh,
So people don't realize that this goes on way too often.
yeah,
It's just out of control. So that's one thing I talk about all the time.
yeah, and it's interesting. It's interesting. Um, but Steve, before we close up here, my thing is that this whole thing about depression, as we said, it's a taboo, for as it relates to adolescents. But also we have to take into consideration the fact that teenagers are going through, also because of the perfectionist notion. Parents are becoming perfectionists and want too much from them. What's your take on that?
Oh, definitely. Um, too many pressures on these kids, and not only from their parents or you know uh, sup- people in their lives who do something to them, but they're also under a lot of pressure because of outside things happening, climate change, the rise of authoritarianism in the United States.
Mhm.
They're bombarded every day with how horrible everything is in the world, and then you'll hear the commentators go, "What are we leaving our children?"
Yeah,
And it's just so scary out there for them.
yeah,
And I don't know, it's just so many pressures on these kids that I didn't have.
right, right, right. Hey, thanks for coming on. I mean, we have learned so much from you, Steve. You know,
Thank you.
yeah, interesting some of the things you have said, and I am sure that my audience will learn a lot. And I'm wishing you all the best with your group, right?
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on, Steve. What's your contact though? Let me ask you that.
What'd you say?
How can we contact you? How can my audience contact you?
Well, I gave you the email.
Right.
Um, I've got my website that goes live tomorrow, I think.
Yeah, I will put that in the description.
But
My audience will be able
I
to.
don't have the domain, and I don't have the link to it yet. I'll have to get it to you, and
Okay,
then
no
you.
problem. I will get that in
Um,
the description.
those are the best two ways. I don't give out my phone number,
Okay, that's all right. I understand.
and remember this: that I'm in Arizona, and we're 3 years behind Eastern time. So
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
8
What
o'clock.
time is it now? What time
Pardon me?
is it where you're at?
1 o'clock.
Oh, because I'm seeing here, basically 4 o'clock.
You're at 4 o'clock. I'm at
Yeah,
one.
in Bronx, New York, and the same thing in Florida and above other
Right.
places.
Right.
In Jamaica now, I think it's about 3 o'clock. Yes, yes, yes.
Is that where you're from, Jamaica?
Yeah, I'm from Jamaica. Have you ever gone to Jamaica?
I have never.
You're missing something. Hurry up and get there, guy.
Well, I'm getting a little old now.
You still can get there. Don't worry about it. Hey, Steve, thanks for coming. All right. Nice talking to you, sir.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
Bye bye.
Bye.
So that was Steve Wilson. He had said a lot, very interesting things that he have said. And yeah, you heard his group. If you are able to join his group, go ahead and do that. You would benefit from his group and what his experience as well. You benefit from. Thanks for taking this time out to watch, to listen to Canyouth Exploration, your topic in a podcast. I am Dr.